I keep thinking when I look out at how we seem to be approaching the pandemic as a society, especially with the lockdowns question, for example, like there's, this inordinate focus on the potential harms of the virus, even, arguably highly exaggerated, especially in certain populations, and then not a ton of thought to the, arguably massive collateral damage, I think, which we're already being able to see demonstrated. It's kind of an unbelievable thing to watch.
Yeah, and that's part of the, what I call a safety culture problem, where we want to mitigate risk of something that's very pressing and something that's very publicized, to the point of ignoring the risks of other things. And I have one of my posts likens this to kind of an autoimmune disease in a person. You want to have a balance of a response to an infectious disease, right? But you don't want to go too far, because then if you go too far, you start destroying your own tissues. And I feel as if that's very analogous to how we handle the pandemic response, in a way that was self-destructive. If we were considering our country as an organism as a whole, there was some collateral damage from overreactions, much like an immune response.
And this is really fascinating because in The Coddling of an American Mind, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, they kind of, I guess, compare the preventing children from being able to experience difficult situations where they have to problem solve something to not training an immune system. I mean, roughly that's my recollection. It's been a while since I read it, but I mean, almost ironic that this is what they talked about a few years back.
Yeah, it seems like many of these things that used to be kind of taken for granted or once common knowledge, the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type thinking, has eroded to the point where it's, and they do talk about this in the book, the what doesn't kill you makes you weaker or something like that, is they've sort of turned it on its head. And I feel like that's very appropriate. They're both analogies that are, the immune system and then versus raising a child to be able to handle adversity, and young adults to be able to handle different points of view. Those challenges are very important. The immune system has to be challenged with microorganisms, otherwise it doesn't know how to function. You can raise mice completely germ-free in the laboratory, and their immune responses don't develop the same way. So we're the same way. We have to figure out how to live in that sort of balance of being in sort of microbial world, not inviting too many serious infections that will cause chronic illness or death, but at the same time not going too far and trying to eliminate sort of the normal course of microbial exposures and infections that people get.
Well, something that, it just occurred to me that, something that I watched kind of appear on the scene and become very prevalent is these antibacterial wipes, right? And like everything antibacterial. What I kept thinking, with my background in biology, like, aren't we kind of driving like, the sort of the resistance strains of things here, and sort of faster than would happen normally, right? And so what your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's studies where, if you've heard of triclosan, which for a while was in everything, the antibacterial soap, they would advertise this contains triclosan. And now I think it's being banned in some countries. I'm not sure if it's banned here or not. I don't think it is. But I remember it was in everything. I think they were even putting it in toys for a while, like in the, just like a layer of some antibacterial residue on toys, And I always thought that was not probably the right way to think about it. And they've done some studies now where they have shown that children with triclosan, they can find it in their bloodstream if they have been exposed to larger amounts of it. They're also more likely, and this is just a correlation, but they're more likely to have, asthma, allergies, things like that, if they're exposed to more levels. That suggests that they have a home environment that is very, where they're exposed to a lot of these type of antimicrobials. And again, this sort of, it's not a true causation type thing, but they've done experimental studies with these type of things as well. And they do disrupt, gut microbiota and could have potential health consequences. So that's definitely a very interesting area of research that I follow.
So let's talk about the current state of, I guess the immune system vis-a-vis COVID-19, and given and the literature that's out there, which I know you pour through.
Yeah.
Where are we at right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. We know that the natural immunity is very strong if you recover from an infection up to the time that we can measure anyone who's been infected. They have an immune response that will protect them, especially from not only reinfection, but a severe reinfection. There are studies with SARS-1 that individuals who recovered from SARS-1 still have immunity to SARS-1, but also would protect them from SARS-CoV-2 as well, give them some protection. There are some individuals who have cross immunity, possibly from other viruses. It's difficult to say which viruses that may protect them from severe disease as well. But the idea that these are completely sterilizing immunity it's not something that is long-term, particularly in individuals who have these comorbidities. They tend to have less durable responses. And the vaccine, appears to work for vaccines. They seem to work for limiting severity of disease, but then it's less clear how durable those immune responses are. And obviously there's breakthrough infections with vaccinated individuals. And I think you have a lot of politicization of that as well. People on different sides, trying to say, this means they work and we still have to, force individuals to have vaccinations. And people who are opposed say, he promised it was going to be, 95% effective. What did that mean? This clearly is some question of whether that initial press releases were accurate. I think that's, those criticisms are valid.
Well, because, how could you know how effective something that was developed so quickly would be? I mean, that is the question, right?
Right, and even in a large population, even in a study, you're going to miss some things. Obviously, it's a press release, so they want to report that it works. Science doesn't move as quickly as people want it to, and that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is.
So I keep seeing pop up in my Twitter feeds, where I know where you and I have been watching each other's feeds, but I keep seeing in the trending or recommended or something like that, fact checkers say that vaccine immunity is better than natural immunity. I keep seeing that popping up. Everything I've seen up to now, and I'm not, of course, not being expert, tells me otherwise. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's also a difficult question because, again, we're still assessing how long-term immunity develops. There are different vaccines. There are individuals who respond differently to the vaccine. There are individuals with previous immunity to different infections, previous immunity to SARS-CoV-2. Now they're mixing and matching vaccinations. All these things sort of complicate the story a little bit, right? I do know generally natural immunity is durable for several reasons, and one of them is because the route of infection is the route that would provide the most protection against a reinfection. That's a direct introduction of virus into the lungs. You have a local response in the lungs, and there are tissue-specific immune responses that you don't necessarily get when you inject a vaccine into somebody's arm. So these are all things that were not controversial in 2019. And that's the reason why people are trying to improve vaccines and develop inhalable vaccines, vaccines that have attenuated viruses, so there will be some replication in the airways, like with the flu. There's a flu mist vaccine that does some of this, and that you inhale. The other problem is that viral infections tend to leave kind of what we call an antigen reservoir. So there's some expression of proteins, and it really isn't, I don't think it's entirely clear how this happens. But you've heard, obviously, that people who are test positive can test positive for a very long time, even when they're not symptomatic. They're not infected. They can't transmit it to other people. And that's interesting because I think that signifies that there is some sort of activity that may be stimulating the immune response to develop a strong memory. You just don't get that with the vaccine.